Proverbs chapter 25. Proverbs chapter 25. Also praying to get my water turned back on tonight. They were at the end of my street, they were working on a fire hydrant, and they hit a water main. And so we had no water. Got some bottled water. I am not worried about it. I mean, other than the fact that they got my street all blocked off with heavy equipment, it's kind of hard to get up and around there. But hopefully they'll get that done, and I hope they get it done quick because the weather's about, the bottom's about to fall out around here. And it's still looking like it's moving our way. I know you're watching the map, Joe. Does it look good? So, he wants to get out of here. He's probably gonna have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go plow snow over at Genesis. So, pray for Joe. I actually hope you don't have to do that, but it is Iowa and it is February. So it's kind of what we get. Proverbs chapter 25, stand with me if you would. We're going to begin reading verse number 1. Now, we covered the first 3 verses of this last week. We covered the first 3 verses talking about King Hezekiah and the king of Judah and all of that. And how it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and when we seek those things out, God gets glory when we find out the truth. When we seek out His truth, when great truths, whether they be biblical or scientific, which are always in congruence with one another, it glorifies God in that. Now we're gonna start reading here in verse number 3. Begin reading with me in verse number 3. Proverbs chapter 25 and verse number 3. The heaven for height, the earth for depth, the heart of kings is unsearchable. Take away the dross from the silver, and there shall come forth a vessel for the finer. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness. Put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men, for better it is to be said unto thee, Come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. Father, bless the reading of your word. Use it for your honor and glory. Teach us tonight. We need you, and I pray your hand would be on us. And I pray these things in thy name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Tonight I want to speak on 2 things. One of them is briefly just commenting on it, and that is the king's authority. I want to talk to you about the king's authority, number 1. And number 2, or I should say in a broader sense, authority in leadership. And number 2, the rest of the chapter is how to conduct yourself. In other words, behaving in public. I want to speak to you tonight on behaving in public. And I think it's going to be an enlightening story for you. And appreciate you being here tonight. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 3 says, The heaven for height and the earth for depth, and the heart of kings is unsearchable. The heart of kings is unsearchable. That means it is without grasp. It is in a place where you can't get a grip on it. That's what that word unsearchable means. The heart of a king is unsearchable. I want to give you something. There's 3 words, and if you're taking notes, I would have you write down 3 words about this passage when it comes to the king. I can't know what the king is thinking. I can't know what my boss is thinking. Can't know what the owner of my company is thinking, unless I ask them, and they may tell me. I remember years ago during the Gulf War, President George W. Bush came out and said, and I don't have all the details of the particular event, but we had just fought a big battle in Fallujah. Brian, I mentioned Brian, he's paramedic, he's out tonight working. Brian was a Marine. Brian is a former Marine. He was in Fallujah. So we had a major offensive there. And there were a lot of questions about why we were doing things a certain way, and President Bush took a lot of flack because of how he handled a situation and what he was putting our troops into and all that. But then within a few weeks, it was evident that we had made major strides and we were able to make major objectives in that war because of his actions. And the truth is, at the time he was taking the criticism, he had information that no one else had. He had information that no one had, and he was acting on the information that he had. Anyone who's ever been in a position of leadership knows exactly what that is. There are times when you have to make a decision. I taught my boys, or tried to teach all my children, I've tried to teach them all to obey me without questioning. You say, well, that sounds authoritative. Yep, it does. I want you to do exactly what I say, when I say, and I want it done immediately, and don't question me. Now, there's a caveat to that. After you've done what I say and you want to question me about it, you have the right to do that after you've obeyed. And I won't go into the deep study of it right now, but we've looked at the book of Proverbs earlier, and we found out that understanding does not lead to obedience. Obedience leads to understanding. I am certainly interested in my children knowing why I say the things I do. However, in my position, I know things that they don't know. As my wife said to one of our daughters, and I forget which one it was, might have been all of them, but I remember her saying to one of my daughters, she said, you know, I've been a 15-year-old girl before. You've never been a 40-year-old mother. And what she's saying is, I know things you don't know. I see things that you don't see. And it's not a matter of authority. When you think of a king saying, I want this done, we think authority. You know, those verses about the husband being the head of the wife, head of the household, and the wife being in submission to her husband. I want you to understand, you need to put all those verses in context and realize that those verses are not about authority. They are about responsibility. You see, there's three concepts, three ideas going on here. There's the idea of authority, there's the idea of responsibility, and there's the idea of privilege. I'll get to privilege here in a moment. But you see, before I have the authority as a dad or as a wife, pardon me, as a wife. My authority as a wife goes very far. No. Before I have the authority, I have the responsibility. The responsibility comes before the authority. The responsibility comes before the privilege. As I had older teenagers, I remember particularly when my girls were at home and they were getting their driver's license. They wanted to be able to drive. And I said, well, that's a privilege. And I will give you the privileges that you need to fulfill your responsibility. If I need you to go, if I need you to drive your siblings to school, or if I need you to take mom somewhere, or if I need you to go get something, you show me the responsibility, and you'll get the privilege. If I have the responsibility, let me start that sentence over. I have the authority because I have the responsibility. The responsibility of the king comes before the authority of the king. The responsibility of the husband comes before his authority. The responsibility of the pastor comes before the authority. And that's the case with every authority. You take our police officers, for instance. They got a badge and a gun. And they see somebody doing something, if they see somebody speeding, they can flip the lights on and they can pull them over, and they can go past the speed limit. So, well, that's not fair that they get to go past the speed limit, other than the fact that they have the responsibility of stopping someone who's driving recklessly and probably drunk. They have the responsibility. Now, if I see a drunk driver, I can call the cops, but I don't get to pull him over. And I wouldn't. If a riot breaks out, I'm going to take, I'm going to get everybody I can that's in my flock, my family, my church, whatever, and I'm going to move them to a place of safety and get away from it. If I'm a cop, a police officer has a sworn responsibility to do something about the crime that he observes. He has a responsibility. And since he has that responsibility, the state or the municipality or whoever gives him the authority to act. You see, the responsibility, that's why the Bible says over in Romans chapter 14, the Bible says, obey them that have the rule over you in the law. It said, for they are ministers of God, and they are there for good and not for evil. And he said, and Paul goes on to say, they bear not the sword in vain. In other words, that sword is not just there for them to impose their will on you. No, they have a responsibility. And since they have the responsibility, then they are given the authority. The responsibility comes first, then the authority. The privilege comes when I fulfill my responsibilities. I earn the privileges by fulfilling my responsibilities. Can I tell you that I'm going to go home? You know that I can go home any time of the day or night I want to and do whatever I want. I can do that. I can walk into the house at 3438 Clearwater Drive. And I can walk into the kitchen, and if there's something in the fridge and I want it, it's mine. I'm going to take it. I have that authority, don't I? Yeah, that's because I paid for the place. That's because I paid for the food that's in that refrigerator. It was my paycheck that put everything there. I see, and it's my responsibility to put food in that refrigerator to feed the family that lives there. It's my responsibility to work, to pay the bills, to keep the lights on and keep the water on until the city busts a pipe, and to keep the roof over their head and the clothes on their back and shoes on their feet and food on the table. That is my responsibility, and that comes... The privilege comes because I have the responsibility. When you are under leadership, remember that leadership has responsibility that you don't have. That leadership has responsibilities that you'll never know. And they have to take matters into their understanding, that they have to consider things in their decision that you don't have to consider. You see, there's a bigger picture than just you. It's not all about me. If I'm working for a company and I want the owner to handle things a certain way, I might make a suggestion and he has the right to say no. He has the authority to say no, mainly because he has the responsibility to look at the whole picture and do what is best for the company at large, or the country, or the church, or the family. Wherever that authority falls, the responsibility comes first. Now, moving to the next part of the lesson here. This chapter involves itself greatly in how to behave in public. How to behave in public. We'll get into why you behave this way in public. Main reason that you behave a certain way in public is because of the effect it has on you, the effect it has on your testimony, the effect it has on those around you. It's not, this is not something of a whim. What should, how should I act so that I don't make mom and dad upset with me? How do I act so I look good in front of the preacher? No, it's bigger than that. Look back, if you would, to the text. Let me cover one more thing here in verse number 4. Take away the dross from the silver, and you shall bring forth a vessel for the finer. The finer is not an adjective right there, it's a noun. A finer is a person. A finer is a craftsman. That word comes from the same word that we get our word refinery. If you have fine china, that means it's refined. It's made from pure, higher grade materials, you see. Now, when it says take away the dross from the silver, dross is an impurity. What they do with silver, and they do the same thing with gold, is they heat it up, and in the fire, the impurities begin to float to the top. And then what they do is they skim it off the top, and when it cools down, you have a metal that is more pure. It is pure silver or pure gold, depending on the carat weight of it, or depending on the classification of whether it's sterling silver or whatever. You have something purified. And he's making an analogy here. You take away the dross from the silver, and you've got something fit for the finer. So you've got something that the finer can take and make fine jewelry out of it. You can make something beautiful out of it. And by the same token, if you take away the wicked from before the king, the throne is established. You take away corruption, you take away the corruption out of government, and the righteousness of the king will be established. The word established there meaning to be built up like a column. It'll be strong because he has righteous counselors around him. See, that's what got Rehoboam in trouble. Solomon had righteous, godly counselors around him, and he was very wise. But his son Rehoboam did not listen to the counselors of his father. He listened to his friends. He listened to his buddies. And ultimately, he almost caused a civil war, and he split the kingdom. Because his throne was not properly established in righteousness. Now, moving on from the king. Look at verse number 6. Put not forth thyself in the presence of a king. Stand not in the place of great men. When it says stand not in the place, that means don't put yourself into the position. It's talking about a physical place, a position, but it's also talking about a social position or a leadership position. And what I'm talking about tonight is how to behave in public. How do I behave in public? Well, in order for me to behave properly in public, I have to know some things. And the Bible tells us some of the things I have to know. And in verse number 6, we begin to see one of them. I want to be the kind of person that is upright. The Bible, it's a biblical word, upright. proper. Not about status, but about character. Not about power, but about influence. I want to be the kind of person that if somebody's willing to follow, I'm leading them in the right direction because I should be, not because I want to. So I have to conduct myself in a certain way. If I'm going to do that, I have to know some things. Number one, move quickly here. Number one, I need to know my place. If I'm going to conduct myself properly in public, if I'm going to hold a position in public, I'm going to be in the public eye. Number one, I need to know my place. I need to know my place. Put not forth thyself in the presence of a king. What is he doing? What does that mean? It means he's taking a position up the ladder that he hasn't earned. This has to do with humility. It says here, put not forth thyself in the presence of a king, and stand not in the place of great men. Don't put yourself in that position. Don't put yourself in positions. Let other people put you in positions. That's what it says. Verse 7, for better it is that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower let me turn my notes. Put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to take this position, and somebody says, you don't belong here. You need to get back down there. Well, that's embarrassing. Or the guy comes in and he just takes a place down here at the bottom of the rung. He takes a place at the lower seats. And the ruler sees him and says, hey, come on up here. I want you up here with me. I want you up here with me. That's a good feeling. But I don't want to put myself in a position. We must be so careful about being a steward of the position that we're in, because good stewardship in the position you're in is going to lead you to greater positions. And by stewardship, I mean how well I conduct myself in the thing that God has given me to be faithful in. Man, I'll tell you what, I had a heart to be a pastor. And in doing that, did I ever preach from the pulpit? No. Did I ever lead an adult Bible class? No. All that time I was in college, I didn't. But I'll tell you what I did. I worked in every aspect of the ministry I could stick myself in. I worked with the youth. We had a bus ministry. I was a bus captain. I did that. I sang in the choir. I got involved in the music program. I worked in children's church. This was a big church. I had anywhere from 30 to 40 in an afternoon Sunday school program, the bus kids coming in. I had anywhere from 35 to 40 5-year-old boys. Can you imagine a church where we had 30 of Donovan? It was a blast. His mom's the first one to answer. No. It was a blast. I had a wonderful time. I loved it. Hey, I worked in the nursery. I said, you want to work in the nursery? I said, well, yeah. If I'm going to be a pastor, I need to know how to work a nursery. So I want to work in there, and I want to work with the nursery director. I want her to teach me how to do this. I didn't go in there telling them, I'm going to be a pastor one of these days. Y'all need to step aside. I'll show you how to do this. I'd never changed a diaper in my life. Are you kidding me? I didn't have children at the time. We hadn't even gotten Wendy yet. I'm working in the nursery. Why are you working in the nursery? I want to know how a nursery works. I want to know how a children's church program. I'm going to pastor one of these days, and I'm going to need to know. And Miss Bobby Jean taught me real well. God bless Bobby Jean Cabinet. She taught me a lot about how to run a nursery. And she knew how to do it, knows how to do it. How do I conduct myself in public business? Number one, know your place. Number two, know the facts. Know the facts. I'm going over things that get people in trouble on the job right now. I'm going over things that get people in trouble in their family and in their job and in church because they put themselves in places that they have not been moved into. See? Number one, know your place. Number two, know the facts. Look at verse number 8. Know your facts. Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. So in other words, as we say, gonna fly off the handle. You say that. And have you ever seen this happen? Somebody gets, instead of reading the newspaper article, they get the headlines and they go off. And they heard somebody say that somebody said that somebody said that she said this, Man, I'm ready to go over there and give them a piece of my mind. And most people that want to give you a piece of their mind can't afford to lose that much. They can't afford a piece of their mind. They don't have much mind left to start with. And you go over there and you fly off the handle. I had somebody come to me one time, and I remember Brother Dave Smith is going to be with us. And Brother Dave Smith was, he was the camp director out here at Cedar River Baptist Camp, about 55 miles west of here, outside of the booming metropolis of Columbus Junction, Iowa. In the town of Letts, Iowa. Letts, Iowa, I think would fit in this room here, if you were careful. It is not a big place, 4 square blocks, basically. Tiny little place. But the camp was out there, and there was we used to take our kids to camp there all the time. And one year, they had youth camp, and we did something else besides go to teen camp. And I was one of the supporting pastors of the church, of the camp there. Our church supported that camp financially and many other ways. Always took kids there to every camp. All of a sudden, one time we didn't show up. And the reason I didn't was I decided I was going to go see a friend of mine out in West Virginia. And we were going to go to his camp one week just to shake things up a little bit with our own teenagers. I wanted to do something in the lives of our teenagers. Oh, and the rumors started swirling. A few weeks later, we were at family camp at Cedar River, and a man from another church walked up to me, and he's a good man. He's not a bad guy. He walked up and said, Pastor Cannon, I heard something, and I want to know if it's true. By the way, we were one-on-one, and I'm going to show you that he was doing the right thing. Sort of. And now, mind you, I've been at camp for 2 days. All my kids were there. My wife was there. I had church members there. So we're at camp. And he comes to me outside the dining hall and he says, Brother Cannon, I have a question. I heard something. I want to know if it's true. I said, what'd you hear? I heard that you were upset about something in this camp and you're not coming back. And I did this. I said, brother, I'm here. Brought the family, brought church members. Does it look like I'm not coming back? I said, you're making much ado about nothing, as Shakespeare would say. This is a tempest in a teapot. There's no big deal. There's nothing, no scandal going on. There's no rift between me and Dave Smith. There's no problem here. Okay, I was out of town that week. I just didn't show up. That's all. But man, we get this idea, we see something, or we hear something, and we get this idea that there's a problem there, and I'm gonna go get to the bottom of it. I'm gonna find out why they said something, and you get over there and find out they didn't say that at all. Probably a half a dozen times in the 33 years I've been in the ministry, I've had somebody come to me and say, I want to know why you said that, whatever it was. I said, well, first off, you're asking the wrong, why did you say that? I said, you're asking the wrong question. What question should I be asking? I said, did you say that? That's a good place to start. If you're going to find out about something, go to them and find out one-on-one. That's what verse 9 says. Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another. In other words, quit gossiping about it and go to the person. And if there's a problem and you're involved, if you're involved, go to that person. Why'd you do that? Wrong question. What's the right question? Did you say that? Well, did you say it? No. Well, I heard you said it. You heard wrong. I didn't say that. I didn't say it. I don't believe it. That's not my position on that situation. Why did you do this? I didn't. I've heard that question probably a half dozen times in ministry. Why? Because someone in haste heard something from a friend of a friend of a friend, heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who told, who said they were absolutely sure of what they were saying. And I'm like, you got it all wrong. That's not at all how it happened. I've seen people's lives destroyed that way. Number one, know your place. Number two, know the facts. Verse 10, lest he that heareth it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. Now look at that verse very carefully. Look at the tail end of verse number 10. This is important. That thine infamy not turn not away. You know what that means? That means you get a reputation. You get a reputation of being a landscaping Christian. You know what a landscaping Christian is? That's somebody, you bring them a load of dirt and they'll help you spread it. You figure that out in a minute. Landscaping. Work with me here, folks. I know you're tired, but they laugh at these. They don't get funnier. Okay? But yeah, you get a reputation. And you get to where nobody will talk to you because they're afraid. They don't want, because these people, they're the kind of people that if it isn't scandalous, if it isn't scandalous enough, I'll color it up enough to make it scandalous. Goes back to that verse we read where it says, to go from the presence of a fool when you discern not the words of wisdom in him. Know your place, know your facts. And I'm almost out of time. Next week I'm going to continue in this. This is going to freight train. This message is going to freight train. I'm going to have to uncouple right there. And I'm going to pick this up next Wednesday night. Know your place. Know the facts. I'm going to talk about know your ability. I'm going to talk about know your effect. Know the truth. Know the truth. Know your limits. We're going to talk about a few of those. I only have 14 of them, so no big surprise that I ran out of time. Let's all stand. I'm glad you're here tonight. We're going to have a word of prayer, and then we're going to have an invitation. Maybe God's dealing with your heart about some things tonight. And you want to bring it to this old-fashioned altar. Whatever the Lord's dealing with your heart about. You're seeking God's will in a particular matter. You're seeking God's answers. You're seeking God's healing. There's somebody here that needs to see God work and needs to see God work in a hurry. That's what this altar's for. Whatever God's dealing with your heart about. You say, Pastor, God spoke to my heart tonight through the message. Heads bowed, eyes closed, so you know what's going on.